Once again, the holiday season is upon us, and this week I want to explore again ways that we can create really fun and abstract art-based gifts for our friends and loved ones this week on Mixed Media Masters. Hello makers and welcome to Spectiva Studios. Now, what we want to be able to do this week is similar to what we did last week. We created some clocks last week, and if you didn't see that video, I'll put it right here. I'll put it right here, but it's something for you to check out. Fun gifts that you can make that really have some meaning to them and are also practical. And along that same line, what I wanted to do this week is create something that is artistic but also useful. And we're going to be focused on decorating wine glasses. Now the approach we're going to take, we're going to be doing some abstract painting on these, and I have 3 different projects that I want to work with you this week. Just give you some ideas. We'll talk about different sources for getting the wine glasses, etc. But I'm just using a standard red wine glass here. It's rather thick. It's not what you would call fine crystal, and it's fairly affordable. And again, there'll be resources for how we're going to do this. Now, we're going to be painting using special paints, and I have one right here. And this is from Folk Art. It is enamel glass painting paint. So it's designed specifically for the task at hand. And one of the things that we'll be able to do with this, and we'll run through this process toward the end of this video, is I'm going to then take the glasses when they're painted up, and I'm going to put them in the oven to cure them. We're going to bake them for a little bit of period of time so that the paint will stick on, so that when we go through the regular process of washing these glasses, the paint won't chip off. We don't want that to happen. We want our gifts to stick around for as long as we can. So let's talk about how we're going to approach this. And by the way, I have a little tea towel here. I'm just going to create a little cushion so I can lay my glass onto it if I need to. And what I'm thinking, I want to create with this first project kind of a tulip effect. And I've worked on this several times in the past, and one of the things that's really fun about these is that when you paint this, we're going to be painting on the outside different colors, but when we are the wine drinker, let's say, and we're looking inside the glass, we're seeing this explosion that's almost like looking inside a tulip in this case. So we're going to put some layered paints in here to create the colors that we want, so we're going to have a different look on the outside as opposed to the inside. So some really cool things that we can do in here. Now, I've already laid out the colors I want to be able to use for my, if you will, petals that are going to be the inside. I'm going to create kind of 5 stripes of each color as we go around here. Now, these paints are very translucent, and sometimes you have to wait and dry it a little bit in between coats to make sure that you can get a rich enough color. We'll play it by ear and see how it goes. But let's say that I'm going to start with my red color here. And, one thing I do want to do, and I'll just mention this just because it might come in handy. I'm going to take a small piece of masking tape, and I'm not really masking anything as much as using it as a spacer. And what I want to do is I want to wrap it around my wine glass, pretty much up here at the edge. And I just want to create kind of a barrier above which or below which I won't intend to paint. And it's going to make it a lot easier to use this as a glass if when you're putting your lips on the glass, there's not paint there. And also I find it just looks better if we don't go too high. So that just gives me kind of a line to work with, and I want to make sure that when I put the petals on, it's going to end up down below that area. All right. Now that said, I'm kind of loading my brush up just moderately here. And I'm going to start from right under where my tape is, and I'm going to just drag a line down, just like that, right down to the base of the goblet area. Okay. And I'm going to turn it a little bit. And let's put in a second line right there. And I'm leaving a gap in between, obviously, because that's where my yellow color in this scenario is going to go. So do that. And again, nature is a little less certain about symmetry in certain things. So we'll kind of have a more organic look if we need to. Looks like I might do a combination of different colors here. And I think one more red. I guess I'm going to do 6. There we go. And by the way, I'm using a fairly standard flat, well, it's a slightly tapered brush. It's about a 3/4 inch size. It's a good size for what I want to be able to do. But again, now when you look inside the glass, you can see how those petals are coming into being. So that's pretty cool. Now, my encouragement with most things when we're painting, especially if there's layers involved, is to be patient. Take your time. As much as I might want to go hit that up with the yellow paint right now, if I start doing that, I'm going to start getting some smears. And it's not necessarily going to blend into a pretty orange color as much as just kind of disrupt what's there. Now, one of the things you can do, and I employ this often, and I did a video on this at some point in the past, is employ the use of a hairdryer to just get over the impatient moments. So this is just a standard, not a very expensive hairdryer at all, but it just gives me an opportunity if I'm working with something like this and I want to hurry up the job, I can hit it with the hairdryer. Now again, you might have to wait for a certain period of time and give it more time to do it, but you can always just test it by giving it a quick touch. It's still feeling a little tacky, but it's not going to be in the same level of easy smear if I want to start putting the yellow color in there. So let me get my brush rinsed here. Okay, and let's see what we can do by getting some of that yellow on here now. So once again, I'm going to load my brush. I'm going to hit all the blank spots. Let's come up here again at the top and let's just make some yellow petals going down. And if the gap's too big, don't worry about it as much because we're still going to cover this up a little bit more. But if you want to just come in, be relatively thorough, you can do that as well. And again, you can start to see on the inside how that's coming together. That's a nice look. All right. So, kind of fun already, and we're not even there all the way yet. Now, what I want to be able to do is let my yellow dry here. And what we're going to do is we're going to start to cover the yellow up. And I have two green colors I want to be able to use. I have more of a spring green, and I have a darker green. And I'm going to start to layer these in, again, in a similar way. I want to put some spring green down, and then I want to put some of the dark green to kind of enrobe this, if you will. And also, I may make it look more like a tulip. I may actually run it up the stem of the glass and make sure that we have that kind of green color in there as well. There's no right way to do this. Again, that looks pretty nice just the way it is. But we're going to decorate it up a little bit more. So again, I have to wait for that yellow to at least dry to a certain point, or encourage it along with the use of my hairdryer. Now I will mention that if you're making several of these, by the time you get down your assembly line, it's very possible that the first one you've been working on has dried sufficiently to continue. So that's one thing to consider when you're not making just one at a time like I am right now. So the next thing I want to do is I want to get some of this the spring green on here. Let me just get this shaken up a little bit. Get it into my palette. And again, let me just use my broad brush here. Okay. And I'm going to pick some of that spring green up. And once again, it's just really just a matter of kind of trying to not necessarily obscure the yellow and the red underneath it, but just we're gonna kind of come in and we're going to introduce this new color over the top of them. And what I often will do is I'll leave a little kind of a line where some of the yellow and the red can poke up above where the green is being put on. Just spin this around a little bit. There we go. Create my boundaries. There we go. Now it's just a matter of let paint her down. So I'm also still picking up a little bit of the other colors. So again, not a sufficient amount of time to let it dry, but it's not going to make a huge difference in the overall output here. Now I will mention that again, that these are fairly translucent colors and they don't do a fantastic job of covering. Now one of the things, and we have talked about this in previous videos, is that if you add a white color, it perks up the opacity of these colors pretty quickly. But it also tints it in a much paler green, so that may not be what we want here. Let's just bring this down here. Nice. We're getting there. We're getting there. And one of the things I'll also mention is that the brush marks can be part of the character. But if it's something you don't want, then make sure you give it some an opportunity to go over it and get rid of the brush marks before they dry, because I'll be honest with you, once this paint does dry, it's very hard to make changes to it, obviously, like most paint. It's not going to be as flexible, and it will leave some brush lines for sure. Right. So, and I'm just trying to get a, not necessarily overall coverage here. It's still going to poke through, but I'm just trying to be as consistent as I can. I might need a little more green in there. Okay. What I like to do is I like to bring the green kind of right down to the bottom, or where the stem starts. And again, a lot of my overall objective here is to create an interesting thing to look at. Now, if you start looking on the inside, you see how it's darkened a bit with this green layer on. And it looks more like a flower, right? As opposed to just these bright colors. So that's kind of fun. And the next thing I want to do is I'm just going to do the same thing with the dark green. I'm not going to cover the whole thing. I'm going to kind of just put some bands of darker green in here, just to make it look more like a flower on the outside. And I'm also going to run it up the stem here, just so it looks like a flower itself. That's the goal. Right? So again, let me give this a moment to dry, or some hair dryer time, and we'll see what happens. Okay, that's coming along. We've had an opportunity for the light green color to dry. Let's work on this darker green. Again, let me get this onto my palette here. And again, I'm going to be introducing the dark green as kind of a lower color. I might create some elements to kind of, once again, interact this. I don't want to dominate my my spring green color here at all. What I'm really doing is I'm just kind of creating a darker green layer, if you will, down here toward the bottom, and bring it up a little bit like this. There. Nothing. Just blend it in a little bit. Hopefully you can see that. It's rather subtle, green on green, but it's going to give us an opportunity to just create a relationship between these two. And I'm going to bring it down the stem here, so let's just make sure we have that going for us. And where we end, I'm going to just kind of start and just choose a magic line down here on where the base and the stem meet. And just make sure that gets covered. Up. And one of the things I want to do is make sure it's as smooth as I can get it. Now, I'll mention also with this particular brand of paint, and I've worked with others as well, is that this brand of paint I find to be a little thicker than I personally like. And in order to work with it a little bit, make it a little bit thinner, a couple drops of water will make a huge difference here. So just thin it out enough to make it more pliable, fewer brush marks, that kind of thing. But there you go. So that is what we're looking to do. And let's. I'm going to take the tape off, hopefully without touching anything here. And you can start to get a sense of what this wine glass is going to look like when it's all done. And again, the real takeaway here is one of really what the drinker sees when they're looking inside the wine glass, and how cool that is. Right? Now that's a simple enough idea. Anyway, that is project number 1. Let's take a look at our next project. Now for the second idea, the concept is very basic. What we want to be able to do is put drops of color onto our glassware. And by the way, I've mixed my paint down a little bit here, or diluted it, in the sense that I wanted to put it in these squeeze bottles so I have greater control, and also the paint as it's coming currently is a little too thick to work with in the way I want. So I've added a ratio of about 1/4 of water to 3/4 paint, and put it in these bottles. What this allows me to do is to be able to drop, and I'm using a foundational color, like in this example here, where I'm putting the blue color down, and then I'm putting a drop of the yellow on top of it, or perhaps the yellow down and putting the blue on top of it. And the objective here, of course, is to be able to create this two-tone design spot and work with them. Now, it sounds great on paper. The problem is when you're actually working on the glassware and you're putting the drops there, a couple things may happen. First of all, it may not go where you want it to go. You may get the foundation, it looks great, and the dot you put on top of it is off kilter, and you're like, that's not good. The other thing, and this is a big problem that I ran into in testing this theory, is that you may find you're working on a curved glass surface. So as you go and you take and you put your drop of paint on there, it goes on, but then it starts to slide down the side thanks to gravity. Thanks, gravity. And so as a result, you end up with something that's not round. It gets a little weird, or just while you're working on it, you bump it with your hand and you smear it, and this happens periodically. And the other challenge is that in order for you to be able to work on this piece and need to turn it so you can work on the other side, is that this first side is going to have to be fairly dry. And I will tell you from experience that these dots take a couple of hours. So quite literally, with this methodology that I said, hey, well, let's go try this, it didn't work out very well because it takes about 10 hours to decorate a single wine glass. And that's not fun. So what do you do? What do you do? Well, I certainly want to take advantage of the idea. I like the idea, but how do I make it work for me? Well, it turns out that the solution may be as near as your kitchen. Now, in my scenario, I'll just share with you, several years ago I purchased this silicone, it's a tray for making chocolates. It's a chocolate mold tray. And if you've ever worked with any kind of a silicone here, first of all, it does a couple things wonderfully. It's very heat resistant, so it's used for spatulas and things like that, but it's also used for cookie trays. There's lots of types of things where you can put them in the oven, they can get really hot, and you can do all sorts of things with them. The thing I love about this is that things don't really stick very well to these silicone molds or sheets. And so it gives us an opportunity to say, all right, instead of putting the paint directly on the wine glass, which is what I originally proposed, what would it look like if I went in and built the dots actually on a flat surface? So I'm not fighting gravity, but it also means that if something goes wrong, like I've got a mess up here, that's not pretty, I don't have to use it, right? It's not stuck to my glass. So it allows me to go in here and to be able to create these individual dots on a flat surface, give them time to set down. And then what I can do now is I can take my glassware, like this guy that I've started with, and I can start and very carefully just peel these guys off the cookie sheet and stick them onto the glass. And in doing so, a couple things happen really quickly. One, I can position these dots exactly where I want them to go. Also, it allows me to work on a curved surface without having to fight gravity, which is fantastic. It allows me, if I want to move things around, and again, if I have a reject dot like this one here, I don't need to use it. I can simply go for the ones that passed muster and drop them in here. And it's a very quick process. Now, what I would propose doing, and what I'm going to do for the other glasses for this set, is I may have different color combinations. This is a blue base with a yellow dot on top of it, and it's going to allow me to create just a good solid look and feel for this particular, let's call it what it is. It's a piece of artwork. And I can create one that has red as the foundation with, blue on top of it, or yellow with green, or whatever I want to do here. So it gives me a fair amount of flexibility to create an entire series of these glasses, which I will be doing. The other thing that is useful with this approach, again, is that sometimes if we're having wine at a party and people forget which glass is theirs, well, they'll be able to identify, well, mine is that one over there, so you don't start sipping somebody else's beverage. So getting these guys into place, and by the way, they come off the sheet pretty easily, and they're still a little sticky on the bottom. And don't worry if they're not permanent sticky, because we still have to put these in the oven and cure them before all of this is going to work for us anyway. So we have another step to go through. But it allows me to come in here. I think I have one more dot that I can kind of fit in here somewhere. I'll put it right down there. How about there? And there we are. So I finally have the look and feel I want, without having to fight gravity and without having to deal with the possibility that I might make a mistake. Easier, easier, easier. So there we go. And by the way, when you look at this on the inside, as you might be able to see, you're also seeing the inside of the dots, which is just a really cool look as we look through this. So very excited to get this one in the oven and see what this is going to turn into. But before we do that, we have to get to, need to get to project number 3. So let's go do that next. Okay, so our final project is going to be taking our glass and we're going to put some abstract shapes on this. But in order to make sure that our shapes come out the way we want them to, we're going to be using some masking tape to mask out the areas. So once again, let me lay this down on its side here. Now this masking tape, it's a brand by Scotch, and it's designed specifically for delicate work. Now it doesn't really matter in this case. I find that it's actually, the reason I like this is that it's a little bit more of a thin paper. It's a smoother paper compared to a lot of traditional masking tape, and it has a pretty good seal. The adhesive, you know, again, from a masking standpoint, we want to be able to put it on our glass and have it create some sort of a seal along the edge where we're going to be painting. So I'm going to make sure I push that down very firmly. I can put it down the rest of the way too, but just get this edge here. And then let me get another piece here, and I haven't really thought yet of what kind of shape I'm going for, but you know, we'll figure it out as we go along. Let's say we're going to make our second boundary. It's going to be this piece of tape here. There we go. And do I want to go a triangle or I'm going to go with something with 4 sides. Yeah, that's right. Going to go crazy, crazy. Here we go. I'm going to do just a polygon of random random characteristics here. And let me put this final piece in here like this. Now again, no right way to do this. I just want to make sure I seal things down. And what I want to be able to do, of course, is you know, hit my paint in this area. And if I'm happy with that shaping, and why the heck not, I can do that. Let me get my palette back out here. And you know what? I'm going to go with this this pink color because, well, I haven't used it yet. So let's get some pink in here. And get one of my trusty brushes. Now, one of the things I will share with you with regard to this particular paint, in my experience also working with glass paint, is it has a tendency to be a little more translucent than what you might find in your typical acrylic style paints. It is a little gluey, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean it in a way that when you put it on, it's almost like a gel that you will find, and that probably lends to the translucency of it. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about here. I'm going to come in here. By the way, usually when I'm working with any kind of masking, I want to paint away from the masking, because if you paint toward it, you can sometimes force your paint actually under that line that you're trying to prevent from getting covered. So I may bring it in from the edges like this and work toward the middle. Yeah, let's get that out. And again, one of the things you probably are noticing already is that there's a certain amount of, you know, this is not going on super thick, right? So I find with the first layer of paint when you're doing this, it really takes a certain amount of TLC when you come in here just to kind of get everything smoothed out. And if you don't take the time to get rid of the big lines, because you can see there's lines all over the place, when this dries, that line is going to be there prominently. So what I'll generally do when I'm working on a shape initially is I'll just go back, I'll go over it again and again and again, and I'll get my paint lines all going in the same direction if I want. And I'm really just waiting for the paint to actually dry enough to get a little bit different, not as wet, so that I can smooth it out a little bit. And actually I'm going to clean my brush just a little bit here so I don't have as much paint on it. And that will help matters along. And I'm really just trying to create a surface layer. As you can see, it's very, 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 you know, almost transparent with a little pink on the edge. And that's going to be okay. That's going to be the first layer. And we're going to have to put multiple layers. And I'm finding with this paint, oftentimes about 3 layers will get me to a point where I have the kind of level of opacity that I want so that the color's actually showing off. Because right now it's very subtle. It's very subtle. So I may kind of put that down initially. And sometimes, once again, you know, hit a hairdryer with this for about 20 to 30 seconds, and that will take care of that layer. And then we can go back and start adding more pink on top of it, and it will make a big difference. But I think I've gotten it smoothed out the way I want. Let me do a quick dry on that, and we'll see where it takes us next. Okay, now I hit that with a hairdryer no longer than 30 seconds, and that entire layer of paint just dried beautifully. And now, instead of having the smooth glass as our foundation to start from, we have kind of a slightly tacky layer of paint, even though it's still rather translucent, but it makes it much easier to put the second layer of paint on. And as you can see, it's starting to color up much, much more than it was initially. And once again, we're going to take our time here and be patient, work on getting the lines out of here, work on scraping our brush off if we need to get rid of excess paint. And it's all about layering. It's all about bringing things in and layering them as we need to. I'm just trying to get rid of any kind of major paint lines that may come back to haunt me. That's going to be the goal. There we are. We'll call that layer 2. Again, hair dryer time, and we'll get there quickly. All right, we're getting a third layer on here, and again, we're getting much more of the opacity that I was hoping for. Now, once again, when you're working with these paints, if you don't mind a little bit of tinting, if you put some white in here, the opacity will ramp up more quickly. But once again, not unhappy with how this is turning out. Just going to give it an opportunity to get those brush marks out. I think maybe one more layer after this will get me to where I want to be. All right, going for layer number 4, but I think this will be our final layer, and I'm gonna live dangerously and go the opposite direction. Yeah, that's right. Born to be wild right here. Let's go down and kind of fill in the gaps, but this gives me a little bit more of the hue. That's really nice. That pink is coming through now solid. All right, let me get that dry, and let's see what happens when we take that masking tape off. Okay, so we have our piece. It's looking pretty good, at least from the outside. And if you look at the inside, by the way, you can see it there as well. That's one of the nice things about working with glass, is it's two-sided. Let's see if we can start peeling off some of the masking here and reveal what's happening. All right, that top line, nice and clean. Not unhappy about that at all. Let's see about this one here. Likewise, that looks pretty darn good. And by the way, in most cases, I would wait a while for the paint to actually get to a point where it is dry before I start peeling things off, because it's just going to firm up a little bit better. But in the interest of time and video, let's get this cleaned up like that. But again, you can see as you look at this that it's actually looking pretty good. And by the way, if there's any areas, I have a little corner down here that I'm not particularly happy with. All you need to do is wait for this to dry a little bit more, but just take your utility knife and you can go in and scratch away at that and just do a little bit cleanup if you need to. But I'm happy with the color, I'm happy with the shape, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go and I'm going to add some more shapes. Pink will be one of them. I'm going to use a variety of different colors in here, but I'm going to come in here and create a few more shapes and paint them up in a similar way. And once I'm done with that, I'll be done with the other glasses as well. Then it's off to the kitchen, because we have a date with the oven to make sure that this paint stays as permanent as possible. Now, as with most paint, glass paint is going to stick to things fairly well, but it's not going to be as permanent as we want it. After using these glasses and washing them and perhaps putting them in the dishwasher, it's only a matter of time before that paint ends up washing off. And we don't want that to be the case. So one of the things we want to do now is to cure our paint by putting it in the oven. Now, the process here, according to the manufacturer's suggestions, are that we put our glassware into a cold oven and then heat it up to 350 degrees Fahrenheit and then bake them for a period of 30 minutes. And that's exactly what we're going to do right now. Okay, so there are our test glasses ready to go. And you can see they've turned out very nice. And I'm going to come in here and let's get this guy into our cold oven. And then let's space these guys out. We don't want them touching one another. There we go. And now it's just a matter of setting these up to bake. And I'm going to do convection bake here. 350 degrees and start. So the oven is off and getting warmed up. I'm going to look back on these things in half an hour and see how we've done. Okay, so the glassware had an opportunity to spend some time in the oven and has cooled off and is now back in the studio. Let me put it here so you can see them. I'll put them down this tea towel. I'm delighted. I am delighted. First of all, you know, the colors hold up really well, but most importantly, of course, is the durability of the paint on these. And you can feel just how things have really hardened. It's almost like having a glaze that's on the glass at this point. So the colors held up, the pieces have fit in perfectly, and as one of the durability tests, I had created a just another prototype glass here. And one of the things I would just share with you, you might be able to see there, is I took a stainless steel scrubbing pad and I went to town on it the other day, and it didn't take much work at all to get that paint off of there. So I said, you know what, let's see what happens when we bake this. And so now with the same pad, you can see if I come in here and just go to town scrubbing on this. Yeah, nothing's happening, which is exactly what we want to have happen, right? Maybe we can work a little hard there and get that there, but it's certainly, this is the kind of thing, if we're going to put it in the dishwasher or hand wash it, it's not going to cause a lot of problems over time. So delighted with the durability of the paint, delighted with the colors, and overall, I'm just really happy with the designs that we were able to come up with. Now again, these are just some examples of what you can do. There are so many different directions you can go in here. But by working on layering, you can really create some very interesting effects on the inside of the glass. By working actually outside of the actual object and painting on a silicone pad of some sort, you can create elements and then adhere them to the glass, and they look really nice when they're done. And then by using masking, in this case we're using a masking tape that's used, it has less adhesive, but it also is just a much finer adhesion. And it creates some really nice clean lines so you can create whatever kind of shapes you want. Some really good stuff going on here. Anyway, those are the examples. Do what makes you happy, but hopefully this has inspired you in some way to go out and create your own content. And again, in the description below, I'll have links to all of the different things we've used here if you want to try your own stuff out. Anyway, that's all I have for you this week. Thanks so much for dropping by. And by the way, if this is the kind of thing you enjoy, we drop a video every single week. Just feel free to hit that subscribe button. All right, I'm Spider, and I'll talk to you next time.